Rosita Abdul-Williams, Joanne Eaton.
Here.
Phyllis Harden here. Robert Momartz.
Here.
Rochelle Whitmaster. Tom Ricker.
Present.
Jim Sawtell.
Here.
Assistant Town Manager Beth Moisky.
Here.
Attorney Liz Cross.
Here.
Planner Craig Fox.
Here.
Okay. Next is discussion regarding home occupation, daycare home. Does staff have an intro for us?
Sure, I can take it. All right, I'll start. The town board has asked that we bring before you discussion regarding daycare homes. Currently, our town code definition of, the term is daycare home, is 6 or fewer children, and I think a request or more has become forward to members of the town board wanting the town to consider increasing that number of 6 children in a home daycare to more. And the question is, are you interested in considering that? And if so, what would the number be? And I think your limit is 12. 12 is the largest that you can have right now in Boulder County. The city of Boulder is the only one that has 12. We surveyed most communities. The majority of them have the same rules the town does. City and County of Broomfield has 6 but allows for 2 additional school-age children, so sort of an after-school addition would be my assumption.
Okay. Who wants to kick off the discussion?
A few thoughts.
Well, by the way, do you have, I believe, don't they have this communication?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. That just came in this afternoon.
Okay. Do you want to summarize that just so it's kind of on the record?
This is a memo from Karen Bear Crawford and G. Lair. They live at 2301 Daly Street. Their comments regarding home occupation, they live next door to a daycare, home daycare, and have not had the best of experiences. They've experienced concerns with regard to parking in front of their home, traffic, noise, things like that. And ultimately, I'll read their summary. It is our opinion that any changes are made to the home daycare code that they be more specific and limit the number of children to the ability of the location, daycare home site, and immediately adjacent roadway to that site to adequately provide for the associated parking and any additional vehicle traffic thereby created. The use should be contained in the home, like most home occupation regulations require limited and controlled outdoor playtime. We are not against home daycare, but there is a point where home daycare becomes bigger business and no longer belongs in a residential district. Please maintain the residential quality of our neighborhoods and don't allow home daycare businesses to become more incompatible with adjacent and surrounding properties. So there's more detail in the body if you want.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I would just add that in the past we've had requests for daycare. I think the last time I remember was one in original Superior, and it was felt that 6 children was probably enough to handle it. And the issues were around some of the issues that are expressed in this communication, but primarily was like parking and basically the morning and the evening drop-off and pick-up issues. This communication has a number of other issues that obviously are enough of concern to these people. So anyway, for whatever that's worth. But we settled on, when we went through this, and when we redid the code a few years ago, we were more careful in how these different care homes were set up and followed state law closer. But it was felt that at that time anyway, the 6, taking care of 6 at max in a daycare home was plenty.
Okay.
Particularly the assumption is there's one provider.
Yeah.
It doesn't count
That
if you have somebody who comes in to help then their car is there also all day.
Okay. In the packet, you said the recommendation is Planning Commission's asked to consider increasing the number of children in the home daycare from 6. Does staff have any kind of recommendation, pro or con?
Fred and I discussed that today. I can honestly say we both lean toward keeping the code as is, particularly with respect to concerns regarding traffic. When you think about 6 kids, that's 12 trips in the morning, maximum if it's 6 different families, and then 12 in the afternoon. Going in, 6 going in, 6 going out. Add just 2 more kids, you're almost 28 trips down that street. So it can grow exponentially.
I just want to add something. Also, if there are different ways to skin this cat, you might say, too. I mean, if the feeling is as well, we'd like to maybe allow a few more, a few more children in a daycare home, possibly after the level of 6. In terms of a zoning issue, it becomes instead of a permitted use in a zone district, residential, we're talking about single-family residential zone district primarily, it becomes maybe a conditional use. And then we talk about issues, under that rubric, we end up talking about the issues that are present in the particular location in which someone is requesting to have, home daycare. And if they are required to have a conditional use, well, then we would, you look at the traffic issues and how is the house situated in relationship to some of the issues that these people bring up, obviously. So that, in terms of wanting to increase the number, there may be then, maybe the idea would be to create a caveat. It's not a use by right. It's not permitted by the use by right. It's done by some other permit use besides just your home occupation permit. So anyway, that's one thought.
So I'll just piggyback off of what Fred was getting at. And there's a memo that was in your packet as well that expands on this more. But right now, home daycares are treated as home occupations, so they're an accessory use in a residential zone. As a home occupation, they have to meet certain criteria and certain standards similar to any other home occupation. And those are listed out in Section 16.6.140 in the code and also in the memo. And there's several provisions in that home occupation section that would potentially be implicated if the number of children allowed in a home daycare is increased in terms of external consequences or effects from more children. It's a higher use. So things like, traffic, outside presence, play equipment, more workers that might be coming to the home to help out. So that's something else to consider in terms of increasing the number of children allowed in a home daycare. There's a greater risk of running into problems under those general provisions that are applicable to all home occupations at this point.
And if you looked at the existing schedule of uses in the code, we've got, family care homes, we've got child care centers, small total care, large total care, and daycare homes. And those are different categories that are listed in terms of care of some of them care for older people or whatever, like I think it's large total care or something like that. But anyway, when you look at the matrix of what's allowed and what's not allowed, it's quite complicated. I mean, these things aren't just all allowed in these zones. For example, family care or a child care center is allowed in the RM zone, which is the medium density zone, only by special use permit. All right? So there's some small total care is all special use permits for whatever residential zone it's in. So the only one that's really permitted across the board is daycare homes, as currently defined in the code, across all of the residential zones in the original Superior, where the standard zoning exists. So there's a variety of abilities to do these things in these zones, definitely within the zoning ordinance now. So,
Okay.
that.
A couple questions.
Okay, Commissioner McCall?
Where did this request come from? Is there a citizen interested in doing this, or?
As I mentioned earlier, I understand that a home daycare operator has approached the town board.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. And then do you know at what point the state require, or what the ratio of adults to children is in?
So it depends on the license that you have with the state. And I included some of this in the memo that I provided to you guys.
Yeah.
So it really does just depend on the type of license. And off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but looking at the chart I
at the
provided in the
licenses,
back.
but I didn't see the ratio of adults, or let's see, the ratio of adults required. Like, can a one person take care of 12 children?
It looks like up to 9 is, one
Yeah,
person could do up to 9.
I see, 7 to 12 provider needs an assistant when the 9th child is, okay. got it.
Exactly.
Okay, so that adds yet potentially another person to the mix.
Potentially, but under that specific license. And again, as I pointed out in the memo, because
that's large
Superior
child.
right now limits the number of kids to 6, there's some licenses that, just by virtue of the limit of 6, that's excluding. So it might not even, that license where a second adult is required is probably not even implicated right now. It couldn't operate in Superior under the current provision.
So what would they be if they had 12 children in there? What type of
Under a
license?
state license,
Or what are their license options, I guess, if they were to have 12?
you could get a state license for a large child care home.
But we don't permit that in town.
No, because
I mean,
Superior limits it to
What
6.
is, and sorry if I didn't follow all this, but under what license type in the town of Superior, can somebody have 12 children in their home?
You cannot have 12
If
children.
we approve, if this were permitted, what license type would that mean we would be approving large child care home?
No, that's just the state licenses. So at the town level, at the local level, you're not approving these different kinds of licenses. You're
Right.
just getting a home occupation license to operate a daycare home. And then you would also, in order to go functional and be operational, have to have your state license. And that's where these distinctions come in at the state level.
So if we approve this, what I'm trying to get at is if this were to go forward, there's the potential, I mean, if you have more than 9 kids,
So if the
you would
Superior
have
Code is amended to allow...
You need to have an employee or a second adult.
Right, if the Superior Code is amended to allow up to 12 children, presumably somebody who wants to operate a daycare home can then go apply for any one of these state licenses that would allow up to 12 children. If it's one of the licenses that requires a second adult provider,
Which there's only one, which appears to be
which
up to 9
looks like
child.
only one,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Commissioner Martz, you had some comments?
Yeah, I had a few, and they kind of follow in line with the correspondence we received. The first thing is, by doubling the amount of kids, you still have the same initial amount of space, so everything is getting more compressed. I think that the more children you put into a fixed amount of space, the more intense it gets, whether that be in terms of volume of activity or volume of noise. By doubling the number of kids, in theory, you could be doubling the number of cars. Beth, you referred to a max of 6. That would be 1 car per kid. If they were dropping off 2, that's something else. But the point is, by doubling the number of kids, you're possibly doubling the amount of traffic, which is twice as many trips as you were running by everybody, which was, 24, be turning into 48 extra neighborhood intrusions, as it were. That concerns me. What also concerns me is the impact on the immediate neighborhood, those properties that abut such a daycare place. I can't believe that they would possibly be happy with doubling of the activity going on. And then I'm also concerned about who's going to oversee or conduct these inspections that are supposed to take place. They're supposed to be reviewed once a year and this kind of stuff. And what does that inspection entail? Do you talk to the neighbors, or you just take the statement of the provider, the service provider at face value? That concerns me also. So my gut feeling is I'm against it for those reasons.
Mr. Reed?
When do you lose the residential quality of a neighborhood? People buy homes in a neighborhood feeling that it's going to be residential. By the time you have 6 kids, I mean, especially if they're not your own, sometimes you want to murder your own, but you know how that goes. But anyway, to me, it would be a great loss to the residential quality of a neighborhood. I think it's extreme.
Commissioner Saltiel? You had that look of...
I tend to agree with Commissioner Eaton. I think that when it comes to introducing commercial interests into residential areas, we need to go very lightly and carefully. And it just strikes me that having a limit of 6, I assume it's been in place for quite some time. It seems to be working out pretty well, pretty decent compromise. Increasing it may be an invitation for trouble, in my opinion.
Commissioner Ricker?
It would seem to me that it sounds like somebody's trying to turn it into a business because you increase revenue. And I always have a problem with the whole idea of the cottage industry out of your residence thing, no matter what it is in the code. So, yeah, I'm not as thrilled with that over 6.
And I would agree, I'm all for home-based businesses, but they have to be within reason, and that feels like that's going to push it outside of reason.
Yeah, I have the same issues I think everybody else does, the parking. The one thing that I have an issue with is if we allow 6 and that daycare provider has 3 of their own, they're already at 9. So maybe they only have 1, so that isn't a big deal, but I don't think I would be interested in increasing amount because of parking and whatnot.
Does 6 include in our town? And I just don't remember. I know there were situations where your own kids counted towards the number. In our town, is 6? Is it 6 in addition to your own, regardless of how many you have?
It's just a flat 6 number, so the only time that you're thinking about your own kids is in terms of your state license. So if you were trying to operate in Superior and you wanted 6 kids and you had 6 kids to come as part of your business, and then you had 2 of your own, you couldn't do that. You did under most of the state licenses. You'd have to only accept 4 because you have to count your own too.
Okay. So the state requires that you count your own
Right.
as part of the license.
Right. I think for most of them.
There were some that were
Sorry, I
slightly
didn't
different.
memorize all of the
One went up
license
to 8,
provisions.
one that you could have 2 of your own and 6, I think I remember seeing.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky in the nuances between the different licenses on, for example, having to have another provider when the 9th child arrives, or you can have, 3 kids in a certain age range, and then when you hit the 4th kid, you can't have any more in that age range. So,
Well, and that's where I'm getting a little bit confused. Not that I don't that we need to beat this horse at all, but when you're talking about licensing versus city and county of Broomfield, so I assume nothing to do with state license, says no more than 8 children total, including the children of the provider, and in no event more than 6 children not attending full-day school. I mean, so they have sort of specific restrictions.
Yeah, they're a little more detailed. I mean, if you read the daycare home definition in our code, it's sort of, I would say, I don't know what, open. I mean, it says, means a residence whose occupants are licensed by the state for the daily care of 6 or fewer children. It doesn't make a distinction between, well, whether you've got 2 of your own plus.
Yeah. So it's 6.
It's 6.
Okay.
In my view.
And I'd have to agree with Commissioner Lamartz that said, are we we watching this, you know, I mean, this to me feels like we need to address this separately from this discussion about what we want to increase and find out, I mean, there's, if this is accurate, I mean, unless it's investigated, we don't know, you know, toys shouldn't be, according to, if I read this correctly, there shouldn't be even storage facilities for the occupation outside the home. Does that mean something like that?
I mean, the way the home occupation provisions are drafted now, there is some tension between perhaps even a daycare home that's currently operating in Superior with the 6-child limit. You know, if there's effects of that daycare outside the structure, there's traffic impacts.
Right.
There is some tension
Noise,
between
traffic.
those provisions and perhaps a daycare operating lawfully under the Superior Code today. Certainly, if the town wanted to increase the number of kids that are allowed in a daycare home, you only increase that tension or the likelihood that a daycare home with 6 to 12 kids is going to run into problems under the home occupation provisions in terms of traffic and noise and effects to neighbors and, you know, play equipment outside and all that. So if you were to increase the number of kids, you would certainly need to consider amending the home occupation provisions to either make exceptions under some of those specific provisions, for example, the parking or the traffic provision, the noise, the outside storage, or a very general exception to exclude daycare homes within the general category of home occupations.
Motion?
It comes down to being a safety issue, as far as I'm concerned. I had a personal experience back when I was in another city with a home daycare operator that had way too many kids for one person, and we ended up pulling our kids out. I mean, there's no control. And I don't know that you have any system in place to enforce that.
From my perspective, I agree with everything everyone else has said. I also read that the home occupation limits any activity to 25% of the home. So let's say you got a 2,000 square foot home. That says you only should be dedicating 500 feet to home daycare, which I'm sure they're not doing. I'm sure it's getting much bigger. Wait,
I'll interrupt you real quick if I can, just to make a correction. That is the only provision in the home occupation section that actually exempts daycare homes already from that 25%
Never mind.
square foot area. All the other ones don't, and those may be implicated.
Okay.
But the state requires you have to have so much space for the children in the backyard and all.
The state does have certain requirements for how much outdoor play area per child is required.
Okay.
I didn't get into that kind of detail in the memo because it wasn't, I think,
Okay.
necessary.
When they get their license, they have to show
the space.
So we've got an interplay here between what the state kind of is doing and then what the town's doing. And they, when it's in a lower level, things seem to work pretty good. When you get more, then it starts to break down, in my view.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is pretty much unanimous agreement to not do a thing. Is that correct? Okay. Beth?
I just have a question for you, because as Fred brought up earlier, if a application came forward for a special use permit, would the planning commission would need to handle that on a case-by-case basis, but someone may come forward and ask for special use permit to have more children, just knowing that that's in the code now.
Okay.
Make sure you're aware of that.
Okay.
So we have the option to discuss that tonight, or?
I don't see why not.
Well,
We don't know the facts
We
of
don't
the
have a lot of
particular
information.
case.
No, there's not a particular case before us right now.
hypothetically, if it's, so we don't know where it is, so it doesn't matter. I mean, hypothetically, if you want to do a child care center and you're in the RM zone, you're in original Superior, you would have to get a special use permit, and that would be a site plan, and we'd have this circulation thing, and how is this going to work, and all of that. In fact, we went through that with one of them here, and we decided it wasn't going to work very well at all, so that went away. it's in Rock Creek, that's a whole different ballgame, particularly if it's in, it looks like it'd be in a residential area. How we would handle that there would be, you know, I guess it default as a special use permit, but they'd also have to get approval from the HOA, and that, they may see that that may be contradictory to their covenants, and they wouldn't, it could be contradictory to their covenants, so they'd say no. Well, we're not about to give them a permit if the HOA is saying no. Doesn't seem practical to me.
Fred, it says where it is, in a sense, because this is the next door neighbor that wrote this. It's about 2301 Daly Street.
But we don't know if that's the one that wants to expand versus
No,
another
this is
one.
next door.
Well, this is next door to a daycare, but we don't know if this is the
I
daycare.
get it, okay, I'm sorry.
It may be, but
It may not be all. You always think of these things in terms of the whole, and actually it's better to discuss this without knowing
Without knowing.
who it is and where it is.
is our code enforcement guy the one that would investigate like this, the issues in this letter?
Sure, he can. The home occupation section does require that annually there's some sort of checkup on home occupations across the board. That would include daycare homes. I'm not sure how that works on the ground here in Superior, how that's been implemented, but that is in existence. But as far as, more frequently kind of on the ground going and making sure that everyone's in compliance, that would be the code enforcer.
Yeah, you're really, on a deal like this, you're really depending on people being honest, because nobody's going to sit out there and count bodies going in and out. I guess unless you're trying to file a complaint or something, you might do it, but
But if you're a registered business in town and you're running a daycare and it's an inspection, then there's no need to sit in your car and count. I mean, I would presume you can go knock on the door and, does the code officer have the right to do that? To actually perform an inspection, and does it have to be?
The inspection may have, if it's an actual formal inspection, it may have to be noticed. It can't just be surprise. But the code enforcer can certainly walk around town and observe things, like any other member of the public. But as far as an actual inspection into the house on the property, there's likely some notice that's required.
Well, the process is, if someone complained, well, then that triggers an inspection. The other part of the enforcement angle is this business where they're supposed to come in and renew their home occupation permit every year. And I don't know personally how that's, if we're not doing that.
Home occupations, unless they're a business license and collect a retail sales tax. So if they're like a Tupperware person that wants to do this out of their home, they get a business license, but there's no inspections or anything. Most times, the home occupations are services, such as computer, doing taxes or something. They don't need business licenses for that. They only need them if they collect a retail sales tax. So there's no way to control.
So then how do we know? So then what's the point of our land use code with regard to this? I mean, is it a meaningless code?
People are supposed to come in and state that they have a home occupation and what it is, if it's not a business license. But people do not do that. So,
But our code requires that they do that. We just don't enforce it.
yeah, we don't know. At least I don't know who has what, where.
So, in a case like this neighbor's talking about, I think it would be worthwhile to, A, see if they have a home occupation license, and does this daycare home provider have a license? And if not, they need to get one. And if they do, I think they probably need to be put on notice that they're causing issues with the neighbors, and when they come up for renewal, if that should be noted, and if they're not going to comply and irritate the neighbors, then they don't get to do their business.
Yeah, but the guy 2 doors down doesn't have a permit or a business. He's never had one, and my neighbor over here doesn't have one. The other 55 people I know don't have one of these. Why are you picking on me?
Well, it's...
I mean, we're not enforcing it. You can't enforce it for one person. We can't.
Well, but that's like saying every speeder, that's getting away with it should also get,
Yes, but if you also are not enforcing anything, then, I don't even know that people even know that they need to have a business license to operate in the town. I suspect they don't. Not that ignorance is an excuse either. I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah.
But that would probably be a reasonable argument.
Or maybe just operating under the radar.
Well, plenty of
That's
people.
more the case, and I'm sure there's a lot of that.
Plenty of people are operating under the radar, but it does not make it okay. And I think as you learn about things, you have to, you can either continue to ignore it or you can do something about it.
Trust me, I'm in favor of discussing this farther and seeing if it makes sense to push this a little harder. I'm just saying it has never been enforced. This has come up at the chamber level. There are businesses that don't want to, they don't want anybody to know that they're operating a business out of their home, and nobody's pushed the issue, and it's I don't know, is there a fee to register your business with the town of any significance, or?
Only if it's a business license.
Only, so just reporting it as a home occupation, there's no.
It's in here in the code, it says home occupations shall register annually with the town clerk, which registration shall include a review of compliance with the home occupation requirements of this chapter.
And that could be as simple as here's what I'm doing, and us saying that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's no
Or
fee.
it could be I'm running a daycare, we might want to.
Is it even,
We might want to check on you.
are they even under penalty of perjury supposed to declare what they're saying? I'm concerned about, I hate to be cynical, but having been an ex-tort defense lawyer about lawsuits, and here we're considering, child care, which every time you pick up the newspaper, it's usually in a very negative context. If we have a provision which basically says that their permissive use or their use is going to be reviewed at the end of a year, then if we're going to rely on a statement, I think it should be on a legal form with certain warnings regarding the consequences of misstatements. That's just to cover our butts, so to speak. And then also maybe set forth certain things that have to be done and within a certain time period. If we're going to have it in the code, and does it create any liability for us if we don't take a few steps to enforce the code, especially if it's a child safety issue? That's what I'm concerned about.
That's a whole other can of worms.
Here's what happens. It's been my experience that a lot of times when children get hurt, even if it's nobody's fault, the parents will bring a lawsuit as a conscience saver. In other words, if somebody can find somebody else at fault, then they're now blameless. So a lot of times it's not just about the money, it's about the issue of responsibility and trying to offload that or get some kind of a declaration. But there's litigation happens all the time when kids get injured. And so I'm wondering if you have the service provider has to make a statement essentially under oath or under penalty of perjury, and these declarations are true and so on and so on. Then if they lie, they have a much narrower window to try to tie us in on anything.
Yeah, doesn't it go back also to that interlocking of the state? It's interlocked with the state, so if there's a problem, this is a licensed daycare, and they have a child get hurt, at that point, that also is not just a problem maybe for us, but the bigger one, I think, is for the state. They're the ones that are going to put some sort of hammer on this thing, I think. I don't know, what do you think?
This is going off in a completely different direction. Governmental immunity plays in a huge way in situations as you're describing. So for for purposes of discussing home occupation licenses and business licenses, they're very much two separate arenas. So I think it's worthwhile, as the commissioners are talking about, enforcement issues with the way the code is written, or maybe beefing up enforcement by changing how the code is written. But as far as kind of going outside this realm of licensing home occupations or businesses, probably best to not go there tonight, and it's not exactly relevant to the discussion tonight.
So, another question, if somebody does have a state license to operate, are they also supposed to register as a home-based business with our town? So regardless of whether they're licensed or not? By the state? So if this daycare has a license to operate, are they also required by our code to register with the town as a home-based
Yes.
occupation?
Yes, you need to run a daycare home in Superior, you need both your state license and your home occupation approval.
Okay. And what is a home occupation approval? Is it a piece of paper? If we maintain a database, do we have anything?
Yeah, we don't have anything. We don't have anything. It says, at least with a business license, you have a form that you fill out.
And it goes to the state.
Occupation, they can just tell me that they have it, but there's no form that they have to fill out saying that there's a home occupation.
But do you have a list?
Say that.
Is there,
And a list.
do you maintain a list?
I have very few on that list.
Okay.
But there is a list.
There is a list, okay.
If home occupation is this daycare situation and they have to be registered by the state, could we not get that list from the state?
That's a good point. That's a good point. And I think there should be a fee. I mean, if somebody's coming down here and you're taking time to make a list, and we've got a code that says you must do X if you want to do X in your home, I think there should be a fee to that. Now, whether it's $25 or $50 or whatever it is, I mean, that's what government does. They charge us things. And so I'm kind of surprised there's no fee there. And if that could help with doing things like cross-referencing the state's list, which I think we should be doing. I mean, it could help head off these kind of issues of well, we didn't even know they were operating a thing there because they didn't register and we didn't know. So I don't know if we want to get into should there be a fee on home occupations tonight. Maybe we'll save that for another meeting.
Well, I mean, I think we should resolve the issue that's before us.
Yes.
Knock that out. And I mean, I'm open to a few more minutes of figuring out whether we want to make some other recommendations or suggest we have another meeting about with this as an agenda item, or
I think as far as this particular one that came before us this evening, I would vote not to recommend.
do we need a motion?
Yeah, we need-
recommendation, or
Yeah.
what?
It's a work
This is just a work session, so
Okay.
no action is
Okay.
being taken or discussed. It's
So I think
simply tossing around ideas.
you can say that the planning commission unanimously agreed that no changes should be made to the limit on 6.
And not only who drives our agenda, if we wanted to
Have further discussion.
have further, around the use of home occupations.
Well, maybe that's something you should run by the board, because I don't want to suggest us running off on a tangent that they don't care for us to be running off on and running up a bunch of bills on more meetings and stuff like that. So I guess run it by them, and if they think, that'd be a good thing for us to talk about, then maybe add it on to another meeting that we're already having, because it's not something we need to have a special meeting for. And agree.
Right.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Anything else? Announcements?
I can update you on the town center. The public hearing that started for the town board on June 10th was continued to last night, June 17th. The There was public comment taken on the 10th as well as last night, and then the town board has started their discussions with respect to the details of the application. They're through the first section of the design guidelines, and they've continued that discussion to next week, June 24th. And we'll proceed from there. The applicant will be here as well. I'm not sure if the board's going to allow or invite additional public comment or not, but I think that's up to the board to do that. We do, did they close it? They did close the public hearing. Okay, thank you. And then July 2nd, we do have a planning commission meeting scheduled. Chase ATM, the walk-up ATM, they've completed their application and are in the process of posting the property. It's in the Superior Marketplace, located on an island off of Sycamore, sort of between Whole Foods and Wendy's. That'll come before you on the 2nd, and we can talk about that next time around. But we've sent our letters to the what am I trying
Property
to say?
owners.
Thank you. Property owners, so they've been noticed about that meeting coming, because it will be a public hearing, because it's a FDP amendment. I think the next meeting in July, we may have a meeting. There's a potential monument sign that might come forward. So if you're saving your Tuesdays, that's all I have for now. I apologize on the packet this weekend. I had issues with my email, and I had no idea until Commissioner Folsom pointed that out. So my apologies. The good news is you kind of knew ahead of time that this was coming, so I appreciate that as well. As always, call or email me if you have issues or concerns.
Okay.
One quick question. Did I hear you said the public hearing was closed?
It was
I thought it was
closed.
not closed. I thought they made a point of keeping it open because it's going to go through to August.
The public hearing on the land use portion of last night's meeting, the PD amendment portion, the rezoning,
Okay.
that public hearing was closed when the board said no more public comment and started its discussion. And the board talked about general issues, and then it started in on its design guideline, sort of page-by-page line item discussion.
But I thought they were going to take public comment in August.
That's
Is that
for
just-
that's for the SURA amendment portion. So there were two items on the
Okay.
agenda last night. It was the continued public hearing for the
So they'll leave
PD
that open.
amendment.
Okay.
And then because the SURA amendment was on the agenda, they opened that public hearing so that they could continue it until a
Okay.
later meeting. So that really nothing was done there except to open the public hearing on SURA and continue it.
Okay.
So that's the public hearing that's continued.
All right.
Just next week, you'd asked for myself to be at the town board meeting as they continue, just in the event that they needed to ask a planning commission question. Next Monday, I'm going to be out of town. So if you're going to be here, Commissioner?
I'll be here.
Okay.
Can you attend?
I can.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.